Welcome, televiewers of Divine Mercy Radio Television, to our program, the Lay Apostolate in the Catholic Church. Last week we began with the topic, the decline of our prayer groups in number and in flavor. We did mention what is happening with our prayer groups. That's what we are trying to answer. What have our prayer groups gone to? Where have they gone to? And we're trying to find out why the quick decline when you begin a prayer group in the church. Why do we have that quick decline in number and in flavor, in such a way that even those who stay back, they carry out those prayer activities, their meetings, as if they are being forced, without no flavor, without no joy, without no zeal. What is happening with them? And last week we did began explaining reasons for the decline in number and in flavor of our prayer groups. We did mention the loss of the first love. And in that topic, we stayed on three important points, which was the lack of fellowship in their meetings. We did talk about lack of unity, because in the first love, there must be fellowship with God and with one another. There must be unity, oneness in heart and in mind, and then there must be love that reigns among us. There must be love, a strong love for God and a strong love for those you stay together with in the prayer group. You must be able to recognize yourself as a child of God and see others as children of God in that love. And today we'll continue from there. The second point we are going to be talking about is neglecting the Lord for his work. Neglecting the Lord for his work. It is common most of the time in our prayer groups to discover that we are too active in doing the work of God. We are too, when it comes to outing, when it comes to visitation, when it comes to doing some kind of external activities, the apostolate of that prayer group, most of us are active. But when it comes to prayer, we might not have enough time. So most of the time we are neglecting the Lord for his work. And I'm not saying that doing that apostolate is not good. I'm not saying that doing that apostolate is wrong. I'm saying that when you are too committed in the apostolates to the extent that it does not match up with prayers, with the time you spend with God. I'm not just talking about the time you waste before God. Because sometimes, most of us, when it comes to prayers, we sleep. When we sit down, we cannot sit for 10 minutes without sleeping. But when it has to do with other activities, maybe sometimes sharing food in occasions, sing, we are active. We are very, very active. And so we are neglecting the Lord for his work. And that has also reduced, it has caused the decline of number and flavor of members in our prayer groups, and even the prayer groups themselves. They might not be sustained for long. And I did mention last week, when we talk about flavor, we're talking about the zeal. We're talking about the oil, the grease that grease the spiritual life. We are talking about that burning fire, that ambition that you have, that zeal that you used to have when you began the prayer group. We are talking about the inspiration, the desire always to be together. That's the flavor we are talking about. We are talking about that light that inspires you and gives you guidance and direction to keep going. So if it is not there, if we have this, the neglect or neglecting the Lord for his work. And when Jesus visited Mary and Martha in Luke chapter 10, verse 38 to 42, Martha had the opportunity to stay with Jesus, but he chose to prepare food for the guest than to give attention to stay with the guest. And so, while Mary was at the feet of Jesus, greasing her spiritual life, receiving that inspiration, that inner light, and getting that wisdom falling from the mouth of Jesus or from the lips of Jesus, Martha was busy in the kitchen preparing food. So she never knew why preparing food, why being active, doing the work. Of course, it was necessary to have food, to prepare food for the guest. But she was losing an important aspect. That's why when she came to Jesus and said, Master, are you not worried that I'm doing all this alone? Can't you ask my sister to join me in the kitchen? Jesus said to her, Martha, Martha, you worry a lot. Sometimes our prayers are inspired by our worries, by our trouble, by all the things that preoccupy our mind, the material things. So we spend time thinking about those things, and then we come, we think that we can cover up by doing so many things for the Lord. And so he said, you trouble so much. One thing is needful, and Mary has chosen this one. He said, and nobody will take it away from her. So there is something you can actually receive which we neglect. You can go on doing the work of God without that God of the work. You will do it, but you will lose the essential things of spirituality. And you can do it so much to the extent that you even lose sight of the one who has given you the work. And when you start doing the work of God without the God of the work, you are working for yourself. Because spirituality, prayer must match up with works. And works must help in prayer. It is very, very important. So, in the life of Jesus, we see Jesus, in most of the occasion, even in his busy schedule, he will still take out time for prayers. He needed time to spend with the Master. And so the more he is having work to do, the more he is creating time for prayer, because he must stay with the Master in order to have the inspiration and the guidance to do the work. So we don't need to neglect the Lord for his work. And most of the time when groups start acting, becoming too active without actually having quality time in prayers. I'm talking about creating time for go for recollections, creating time to have retreat, creating time for good spiritual, immense spiritual activity, intimate spiritual activities. If they don't have that time, most of the time, the result, the aftermath is they are burnt out. The way out. And when they start burning out, you see they start getting tired. The prayer activities become a burden to them. It becomes boring. They pray the rosary without no conviction. They pray the prayers of the group or the prayer group without no faith. They just recite. They are struggling to catch up with time. Let them just go over it. It is a fulfillment of the law by then. It is no longer a spiritual activity that inspire and build and boast their faith. It is more like a fulfillment of the law. They carry out that activities without the spirit of the apostolate. They do that without no love. They do it without communion, without fellowship. We are going back to that word. They do it without the unity of heart and mind. And when it happens like that, the flavor of the prayer group start disappearing. So you see no reason, you see no results of the prayer. You don't see the fruits of the Spirit in their prayer life. You see the people, they carry out, more of those works, but no fruits. They pray, but they don't they don't bear the fruits. You can see them actually immense in that prayer because it is more of a fulfillment of the law. You see their life, they don't carry the fruits of what they actually pray. And so the prayer becomes more like it is not answered. And so every time you are praying against a particular weakness, but you end up not having, the results, it can't lead to transformation because you have been engulfed and immersed into the work without actually having the equal time for the Lord of the work. So neglecting the Lord for his work is one reason why there is decline, why our prayer groups fall apart, why we lost so many members, why we discover that we can't grow. The prayer group is not growing. We just maintain a certain number. We are left 3 of us. Since we cannot have the intimate prayer, the quality time to spend, we are more active like Martha, spending time. You see, sometimes you see some Christians, they can sacrifice mass for, coordinating food for a meeting. And some of them already in the prayer groups, they know that their responsibility is socials. So when it comes to that, they are active. They are willing to sacrifice mass. Some prayer members, even if there is supposed to be mass before their activity, they are willing to sacrifice that mass only to come for that activity. It is showing a lack of flavor. And so in such a situation, you discover that the group, because the essential thing, the summit, the soul, and the most important aspect, Christ himself, which you are seeking in that prayer group, you are willing to sacrifice him just to fulfill a certain kind of a law. It is a sign that we are neglecting the Lord for his work. And so you see most of the time in most of our prayer groups, some persons, even while they are praying, they are busy writing. They are taking names. They are writing down those who are not there on time. They are concerned with other trivial issues. They are like Martha. They are concerned with preparing food, over listening to the word, having a deep time. And we did mention last week that talking about prayer is not just about you reciting. It is also about you spending time to listen. Spending time to listen is very, very important. We have to spend time. Like Jesus, when the disciples were getting tired, he would take them away from the crowd. He said, come and rest a bit. Rest a bit. That resting time was not just to sleep. It was a time of communion, to rest in the presence of God. It was about staying in communion. This is the reason why when God was about to create Eve, God had to cause Adam to go to sleep. Not because he never wanted Adam to feel the pains. It was in order that Adam would not be distracted. Adam can still stay in communion with him. This is the reason why when Adam got up from that sleep, God never introduced Eve to Adam. He was in communion with the Father, with God. So when he got up in that communion, in the light of that communion, he had the knowledge of the one he was in communion with. So he said, this is the bone of my bone and the flesh of my flesh. He said he will be named woman because she came from me. She will be named woman. How did Adam know that Eve came from him? It was because he was in communion. He was not distracted by the work. He stayed in communion with God. This is very, very important. And so as members of a group, it is important we understand when we start neglecting the Lord for his work, it will cause, we are going to be burned out. We are burned out. We lost the zeal. We get tired. That's why many times you see many people who are called to work. They will say, I'm tired. Is it only me? Why must it always be me? They have lost that flavor. Because they don't spend quality time. They are concerned with the work. And because as they work without having time to refresh themselves in the presence of God, they are weighing out. So they will certainly complain. And, Paul says, do nothing without complaining. In everything, present it as a request in thanksgiving to God. It is very, very important. So, neglecting the Lord for his work is a major cause for the decline of our prayer groups in number and in flavor. And when we don't spend that quality time, the religious activity becomes a burden to us. We carry it just to fulfill a law. It's very, very important we take note of this point. And I'm happy that this week we are talking about this aspect when the bishop of this diocese, His Lordship, Bishop Michael Bibi, is teaching on prayers. It's very, very important. He has been dealing with that. So it will help us to enrich our spiritual life and help us to grow and enrich and rekindle again in our prayer groups this aspect that are lacking. It is very, very important we keep that in mind. So we'll take a musical interlude, and when we come back, we'll continue. Welcome back, televiewers. If you are just tuning in, this is Divine Mercy Radio Television. We are on the program Lay Apostolate in the Catholic Church, and we are dealing with the decline of our prayer groups in number and in flavor. And we are given causes, the reasons why most of our prayer groups are declining, why most of our prayer groups cannot be sustained for long, why we have members coming in and going out. Why is there no consistency in the prayer groups? So we're dealing with the cause, the neglecting the Lord for his work. And we are saying and insisting on the fact that when you so much engage in the work without having time for the Lord, you are way out. The prayer group becomes like a burden to you. You are bored during prayers. And it is important for us to understand that, you see, God never chose his disciples and planned that they should become men and women who are worn out. They are not supposed to be worn out. They are not supposed to be cold. They are not supposed to be ineffective. They are not supposed to be inefficient members in the body of Christ. And in most of the cases, when people begin to burn out, to weigh out, when prayers become a burden to them, when they do more of the work and neglect the Lord of the work, they start experiencing what we call spiritual laziness. Spiritual laziness. They become acidia. They are lazy in prayers. They are lazy in reading spiritual books. They are lazy in carrying on meditation. They are lazy in listening to the word of God most of the time. That's why you see in most of our churches, during the time for homily, that's when many people sleep. In other aspects, they can be active. They can be active even during announcement. But when it is time for homily, they sleep. It is a sign of that neglecting the Lord for his work. And it's very dangerous for a spiritual life. It is very, very important we keep that in mind. So as prayer is like, I want us to understand, prayer is like oil in a lamp. And when you don't pray, the lamp starts burning without the oil. You know what will happen. The lamp will become, when you know our traditional lamp that we used to use with kerosene inside before now, you notice that when there is no kerosene inside that lamp, the rope that is used start causing the globe to be dark. And it does not give light. It does not emanate light again. So prayer is like that oil. And as long as you keep pouring the oil, the lamp will not but continue burning. So when you don't pray, the oil gets dry and the lamp becomes dark. And then it becomes useless. It can cause the globe to crack and to break. So it is useless. It causes smoke. It is boring. It does no longer, present what it's supposed to present. It is no longer producing what it was made for. It is useless. And that's what happens sometimes. Our prayer groups, instead of inspiring people, sometimes we discover that people will leave the prayer group. Happily leave without any regrets. So it's important we keep that in mind. Now the next reason why there is decline in number and in flavor in our prayer groups in the church, it is lack of servant leadership. Lack of servant leadership. Sometimes many people are confused out there and they really need help. And they believe that coming to the prayer groups, they will find themselves refreshed, have direction. They believe that they will meet something different from the social clubs that they were in, their village meetings, and the Njangis, where they used to go. But most of the time when they get to our prayer groups, it appears not to be different. The same leadership, the people that lord it over them, in the social clubs, in their village meetings, in their quarter association, in the Njangis, are they see almost the same pictures in the prayer groups. The leaders in the prayer groups do not understand. Most of the time we select people because maybe most of us do not want to commit ourselves. So we are looking for that person whom we think is popular or can support the group financially. So we look for those people and put people who have not actually learned to be stewards in the church. And since they have not learned to be stewards in the church, when they are given position in the prayer group, they don't understand that they are servant leaders. They confuse the difference between being a leader and being a lot or being a ruler. And so they think that the way to lead the people is by imposing on them. becoming like dictators. You give orders. You do not, when a leader does not live by example, he has to impose. He has to impose. And when he does not, when he imposes on people, they start seeing the prayer group not different from a quarter group. And so they feel that, why am I here? They start losing the flavor, the sweetness, the taste that prayer group is supposed to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world. But Jesus said, when salt has lost its taste, what is it good for? The only thing is to tremble on it, on their feet. It is very, very important we understand this. Let me just, for the record, when food does not have taste, what you do to the food is to add salt. You give the flavor to food by adding salt. But have you ever imagined when salt loses its taste, what do you do with the salt? You cannot add taste to the salt. You cannot add saltiness to the salt. Why? Because the flavor of the salt is given not by man, but by God. So he says that when salt has lost that saltiness, the only thing is to tremble upon it. Men treat it with no value. So they leave the group with joy. They are not regretting. Sometimes they can even run with the money of the group. And even when you suspend some of them, they go happily. Because salt has lost its taste. It has lost its taste. This is it. So most of the time, this is what we have. When it is like that, the leaders, they know that they do not have the ability and the influence by example to influence those they lead. So the only thing they do is they start ruling. They lord it over them. And Jesus says to his disciples in Matthew chapter 20, verse 25 and 26, he says, you know that the Gentiles lord it over their subjects. He said, but it should not be so among you. Your part, it should not be so. He that wants to be a master must be a servant. He that wants to be at the head of this body, you must learn to be a servant. So the lack of servant leadership has also caused many to leave prayer groups. Has also caused the decline of number and flavor in our prayer groups. And in such a situation, you see, sometimes we have this conflict. We are going back to the first point. It causes others to leave, to lost the first love. There is no longer fellowship. There is no unity. There is no love for God and love for one another. And being a leader, most of the time, many people look up to you to lead them by example. And when you disappoint them, it is really difficult. Sometimes, particularly